Hi, my name is Joanna Wolf, and I'm really excited to be working with you all on the second week of your Dartmouth seminar. So to just give you a sense of who I am, here's a picture of me from a bike trip that I took this June. You will see that I'm smiling in this picture, so it is not overall representative of the bike trip, though I am in general a smiley person. And this is representative of the types of things that I like to do. And also among things I like to do, one thing that I'm very excited about, very passionate about, is taking complex things such as working with data, working with statistics, and really trying to break them down and figure out what are some ways to make this less intimidating, to make it so that people can really kind of understand and do some things with a minimum overhead baggage. So I'm very much looking forward to working with you on this. The second thing I'd like to tell you about myself before you meet me is that when I think very hard, I have a tendency to frown. And this has increasingly been coming to my attention as I'm getting older. Sadly, I don't think it's because I am thinking harder. I think it's because my frown lines are deepening. But I'm telling you this because if you ask me a question that has me a little stumped or I'm trying to figure out the best way to answer it, I might, what some people have described as scowling at you, and that does not mean I am displeased in any way or that I think it was a silly question, just that you have made me think, which apparently I don't like to do that much. Now, the goal of this video is to introduce you to pivot tables. And pivot tables, to me, it's almost always one of the first things I do once I've put all my data into a spreadsheet, because pivot tables allows you to play around, manipulate your data, summarize it in a lot of different ways, and answer a bunch of different questions. So what I want to do is just kind of take you through some of the functionality. And so I'd like you to imagine that I took a survey of people asking, and I got the response to my bike trip, which I have found in conversations with people tend to break down into one of two responses. People who say, wow, that sounds like fun. I'm really jealous. I want to do that. And people who say, why in the world would anybody want to do such a thing in their spare time? So imagine that I took a survey or I interviewed 19 people and I coded those interviews as either a reaction of fun or why. Now I'm going to use pivot tables to answer the question of how many people said fun and why, what percentage overall. Now, you all have learned from your work with Excel that you could sort this data, you could do functions to count it, to come up with percentages, but I'll show you how to do this using pivot tables, and then we'll move to a more complex data set. So to use pivot tables on this, and don't worry if you don't understand everything or if I go too fast, this is just kind of to show you, we're going to walk through this same process multiple times. To do pivot tables, I go to Insert, here's Table and Pivot Table. Selecting my data, I will say OK. And here you will see the two columns that I had, participant and response. I move response to rows, and it shows the two different responses I had. And I'll move responses over to values, and it automatically counts the responses. So I can see 12 people said fun, 7 people said why. If I would like to have something, especially if this were a lot bigger count, or I had more different kinds of responses, we might want to know the percentage of people who said each. So to get that, I'm going to pull here, go to Value Field Settings, and show values as, and we'll just do it percent of grand total. And now I see that 63% of people thought it was fun, and 37% of people questioned my sanity. Now let's look at a more complex data set. So if you go to the files that are uploaded for today, you will see Wolf Excel to download 3, and I'm going to start with file 3 this year. Go ahead and open that up. And you will see a file like this. Now, one challenge of teaching pivot tables with Excel is that Microsoft, in its infinite wisdom, has introduced slight changes in every single version of Excel on different operating systems. So this things will look slightly different. If you use a Mac, it's slightly different terminology. The buttons might look a little different. You might have to click instead of pull down. So after I show you kind of what the payoff is, I'm going to direct you to some tutorials specific to your version of Excel and give you a chance to kind of play around with that. So the goal right now is just to kind of see some things, and if your computer looks a little different than mine, don't worry about it too much. Use that tutorial to help you. All right, so this is a spreadsheet of, I don't know, I think maybe I have 60 or so responses in here. And then I have surveyed, this is made up data, people by gender, age, their math SAT scores, whether or not they've taken a stats class, and there's just 2 possible answers, yes or no, and their math comfort level. And there are 4 possible answers here. They could enjoy math, they could tolerate math, they could avoid math, or be phobic of math right there. So when you have a data set like this, first thing you want to do is say, what questions can I ask? What do I want to know? What are some hypotheses? So one hypothesis might be that there's a relationship between gender and some of these things here. And we might hypothesize that in our culture, men are more often pushed towards math than women. So there might be more men who have taken a stats class. And I'm going to guess maybe there's more men who enjoy or tolerate math and more women who are on the avoidance scale, again, because of our culture. We might say another hypothesis I would have would be that people who have taken a stats class are more likely to be comfortable with math, and that people who have taken a stats class have higher SAT scores. So we can ask a lot of different questions about this data, and a pivot table is a way to really quickly answer a bunch of these questions and to kind of combine different things and just try some stuff out. One thing that's very nice about pivot tables is that it's kind of an overlay over your data. It's a separate sheet, so you can mess around, make as many mistakes as a pivot table as are needed, and it will not affect anything in the underlying data. So you don't really have to worry about screwing up. All you have to do is worry about confusing or frustrating yourself, and that should be manageable. So let's go ahead and ask some of these questions. I'm going to click on a cell in here, go to Insert, Tables, Pivot Table. It selects my data, and it opens up a new sheet. So this is what I meant by it overlays things. So anything that goes on in this sheet is not going to affect what goes on here. And let's say I think the first question I had was gender and how likely someone was to have taken a stats class. So it's automatically brought up the values, female, male, and no and yes for how likely is it that you have taken a stats class. Now I can move any field in here to values. It's just going to count on these values. So Let's go ahead and convert it to percentages. To do that, I'm pulling on this little clicky menu here, going to value field settings, and I think I want to, and I'm going to show values as, and I have a selection here. I think I want to show it as percentage of row, so that I'll be able to tell what percentage of women and what percentage of men did and did not take a stats class. So, and here we go. Right now, with all those decimal places, that's a little confusing. So I'm going back to value field settings. I always forget to do this. Click on number format. We'll show the data as percentages, but let's just make it 0 decimal places. All right, so 25% of women have taken a stats class versus 40% of men. Now, let's see with gender and math comfort level. So I'm going to move math comfort level over to the columns and get rid of have you taken a stats class. Now I can see, so I was guessing that women are more likely to avoid or be phobic. Men are a little bit more likely to enjoy or tolerate. So that hypothesis was upheld. Now let's say I want to see does whether or not they've taken a stats class affect things. So I'm going to move that over here in rows. It doesn't matter whether you move something into rows or columns. It's just whatever makes it more readable for you or whatever one you happen to move to first. Now what it's done here is it's broken my data down. So here's female overall. Then there's female who said no to math classes and female who said, yes, I've taken a stats class. Men who have said no and men who have said yes to have you taken a stats class. So we could look at, let's see, women who said no, they have not taken a stats class are more likely to be phobic than men who have. Oh, and this is interesting. In this data that I made up, women who have taken a stats class seem to possibly be a little bit more enthusiastic about math than men who have. If that's like too complicated for you, we can get rid of gender from there. And now we'll just look at our data from have you taken a stats class? Yes, these people are more likely to enjoy. Say they enjoy math. At any point I want to change my pivot table, I just need to click on it and it brings up these fields over here. And you can also go up here, it brings up some options up here, and you can click up here to get back and get this screen. If I click in the spreadsheet, it goes away. So we can move around, ask a lot of different questions. We could also move things to this filter area here, and this has created a filter up here. Right now I'm looking at everybody in my data, but if I wanted to break it down, let's say I just want to look at the women. Now I'm just going to look at women and how they responded. If I want to look just at men by themselves, I'll change this to men and their responses to the data. So this allows you to move things around a bunch of different ways. We can look at age here. I'll move age here. Maybe have you ever taken a math class, and get rid of this. You'll see that the table got really messy as I was moving things around. Don't let that scare you. Just move them out. So is the relationship between age and having taken a stats class. People who are over, well, I don't know that I see anything meaningful in here because while under 30 are more likely to have said yes, they're not super far off from over 50 on this. Now, Math SAT score is a numerical value. So all of these we're counting the number of people in each category. Here, we might want to average people in this category. So I'm going to get rid of age here and pull in gender again, just because that's a little bit easier. And let's look at gender by SAT. So I'm going to get rid of this in here. I'll get rid of what's in the column. All right, now what it has done is the default, because it realized that there are numbers in that column, so it added everything together. It's not that someone had an SAT score of 56,000. So the sum of all the SAT scores is not particularly meaningful. So to get average, I'm going to click on this pull down menu, go to value field settings, and click on average. And I'm going to remember to change my number format and I'll just get rid of the decimal places. All right, and we'll see that here women have slightly higher Math SAT scores. Let's see if we were interested in age, see if there's anything with age. Let's see, over 50 have the highest Math SAT scores, but that's not a lot of difference there. I would predict that people who have taken a stats class have higher SAT scores. And yeah, that is the case. So the point here is just to show you how you can ask a whole lot of questions really quickly, just with a few clicks, test some things out. So it's very low cost to see what you can do with your data here. So this is the payoff of using pivot tables. Now, what I would like you to do is, now that you've seen this payoff, I'd like you to do two things. First, look at your data and think, what questions do I have? What would I like to know? Do these things correspond? Do I have more of this than of this? Is there a relationship? If I've coded on 3 categories, is there some sort of, when one is a particular level, is something else more likely to be another level? So think about your data. What questions do you have about it? And then I would like you to go ahead and Google for an Excel tutorial. Oops, I didn't mean to bring that up. So here, what I'll ask you to do is type in pivot table Excel and then the version of Excel that you have, and possibly, and then your operating system. So we can say 2010 Mac, and there will be a number of different tutorials on here that will show you how to do some of these functions that will actually have the exact labels and names. So I would like you to take one of these tutorials. I would probably go with the Office Support one, and see how you do it, and then take the data that I have provided, the Excel spreadsheet 3, and see if you can play around with it to do some of the functions that I did. Now I want you to keep in mind that if you run into a roadblock, that or you get frustrated, then the worst thing that will happen is you'll be a little bit frustrated. If you run into a roadblock, let me know in the morning. First thing, I have asked for several helpers in the room, and we will get someone to you right away. Hopefully someone who has the same version, or at least the same operating system as you, and we can see what's causing the confusion. Now, you might also be excited to start playing with your own data. So let me give you a couple warnings. When you do pivot tables, your spreadsheet should look like this one, in that There are no blank rows. There's nothing like this in here, or that was column. There are no blank columns. There are no blank rows. You might have done some things to make your data more readable. So you want to maybe save a different version of your spreadsheet and get rid of anything like an extra row, an extra column, so that everything is together all in one continuous spreadsheet. Then, when you go to do the pivot tables, make sure you have clicked somewhere on this continuous spreadsheet. So there should not be, you don't want to have another row, even another row up ahead. If you have several up here, try to get it so it's all in one kind of flat spreadsheet. And again, if you're not sure how to do this, we will work with you first thing tomorrow morning. There are, with many computer things, very small things sometimes can cause really big frustrations. So don't worry about it too much. We will get you to a point where you will be able to do a lot of different things with the data that you have collected.